Very nice. So when's the last time you ever said, Lord, have mercy? So, this is happened in the middle of this week. So we like gardens around the house. Not a big piece of property, but we like the garden where we can. And my responsibility is the dahlia garden and the tomatoes. And because of the rain we've had, they're both doing well. The wife does herb garden and the roses. And we try not to get in each other's way. But the other day, I noticed the dahlias were drooping a little bit, so I said they need some water. I took a bucket, because I didn't feel like bringing the hose all the way around. I took a bucket, and I started pouring on the dahlias. Now, if any of you have ever read the book Watership Down, Watership Down. Well, when I did that, they must have been hiding in there because about 7 rabbits flew out, and I had sandals on, and the two little ones, they're no bigger than a chipmunk, because I know they were chipmunks in their ears. And they ran right across my feet. And I said, Lord, have mercy. But they were beautiful. I don't think they'll hide them, and they might. So today's message, above all else, mercy. And I think and I hope that you'll need someone to help you misunderstand it. It's pretty clear. It's pretty straightforward. Mercy is what God is all about. And we need to depend on His mercy and trust in it. I'm going to read one thing I didn't plan to read till yesterday, but I liked it because it speaks a lot to where we are as a society, global society, and people across the world. It's written by 2 men who graduated from Oxford. They live in England, in London or outside of London, and it's called Tricky. It's not a big book, it's called Tricky. But it's all about the trickiness of navigating through life and having faith in that life, and particularly faith in Jesus Christ. So they say this: in the olden days, they were 20 years ago, people sent messages with a pen and a paper. When they wanted to know the news or sports results, they bought a newspaper. When they took photos, they had to take them to a shop and wait for them to be developed, and discovered that the pictures were out of focus anyway. And people used plastic rectangles, a bit bigger than this book, called videos to watch films. That's all true. Most of us here, not everyone, but lived through that time. So now we can do all these things in seconds, using something half the size of this book. Bob Dylan sang the song, "The Times They Are Changing," no kidding. If you don't know, Dylan was a singer from the days before iPhones were even invented. But many people, this is the point, many people think the Christian faith belongs with those videos. Old, outdated, irrelevant, it's left over from a time that's gone by, and we should be done with it. It doesn't really have a place in our world of iPads and Google and social media. And yet what these 2 men found out, that's why they wrote the book, they've traveled many places. And what they found out is not everyone thinks like that. Many people think the opposite. We've met people from all nations, all ages, all religious backgrounds, and all types of personality types who have found themselves drawn to a man at the center of Christianity, Jesus. And that's really strange, they discovered. Here's a man who lived 2,000 years ago, worked as a carpenter, never traveled very far from his original place of birth, and died, listen to this, he died as a criminal. He really did, you know. He died as a criminal. Yet here we are, in a very different world, and what he said and what he did still is the subject of countless books, countless movies, and countless arguments. Oh, amen. Because people discuss him and they all have different viewpoints of what he is and what he isn't. Some love him, some dislike him, some try to ignore him, but unlike all the other carpenters who lived in the Middle East at that time, in AD 1, almost everyone has some knowledge of him and some opinion of him. I just thought I'd like to share that with you. So, a quick beginning or introduction to, I'm going to read you 3 scriptures, and I think they're self-explanatory. I'll go over some details about those scriptures when I read them, but it all has to do with mercy. And when I was a young fellow, about 20 years old, in college, I decided, this is the beginning to, it's not obviously reading from the text, I decided to do, long before Ancestry.com, I decided to do a coat of arms with a family name, Rollins, the name Rollins. And a firm in Boston did it, did a nice job. I still think I remember the price, and back then it was $47.50, so you can do the inflation, it would be probably a couple $100 now, I don't know. But they did a great job, and it came back, and they did a historical record. It turns out the name, they believe, came from Solomon the Great, the Holy Roman Empire. He had a general called Rollins. It was one of his, he had 2 generals, but one was, it wasn't so much military might that he controlled a big landmass in France and into Germany and down into northern Italy. He had a big landmass that he was over. But one of his generals was Rollins, and the people that followed him were called Rollins men. Rollins, and then when the cells went over to England, the name became Rollins or Rollins. And so I was excited to read that. Then I saw the coat of arms, which didn't excite me back then. It looks like it's silver and black, looks like Las Vegas Raiders colors. It does, and I still remember, I think it's somewhere, I'm not sure, someone in the family has it, haven't dug it, we don't have it. But anyway, there was some red in it too. But the thing that got my attention in the shield, it was really well done, a big wooden plaque, well done. And it showed 3 swords. One sword was up for valor. I like that because back then in my 20s, I was competitive, liked to win at everything I did. Of course, I didn't. Played a lot of sports. I was easily got excited about things. But this is when I'm 20. But then what they said about this, from what it meant, was that when Charlemagne went through with his people into different lands, while he would go to the villages and whatnot, he wouldn't outright slaughter them or just wipe them out like the Vikings did. He brought culture to them, he brought music to them, he brought literature to them. They didn't pillage, plunder, and other stuff. Instead, they would assimilate with the people and help them rebuild their villages if they needed and whatnot. And it was mercy, twofold mercy. And now I say hallelujah to be part of that kind of lineage where it wasn't just about let's conquer regardless of how we do it. Instead, we'll have mercy on the people that we run into. So anyway, let me read you Exodus 25, 10 through 22. You may have heard this before, you may not. It's about the Ark of the Covenant. Indiana Jones is still looking for it. 10 through 22. And they shall make an ark of acacia wood. 2.5 cubits shall be its length, 1.5 cubits its width, and 1.5 cubits its height. A cubit equals approximately 1.5 feet, 1.5 feet. So this chest that asked to build is about 4 by 2 by 2. Think of a chest that's 4 by 2 by 2. Not that big. You shall overlay it with pure gold. Nice. Inside and out you shall overlay it and shall make it on a molding of gold all around it. By the way, an ark, I should tell you, an ark just means a safe place. You know, Noah's Ark, There was another ark, Noah's ark, meant that he was building a safe place for people. This safe place, this ark, is meant to hold the very testimony of God, which we'll get to in a minute. And you shall, verse 12, you shall cast 4 rings of gold for it, and you shall put them on the 4 corners. 2 rings shall be on one side, 2 on the other side. You'll make poles out of the same wood, and overlay them with gold as well. So this thing's really fancy and expensive. You shall put the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark that they may be carried by them. You might have seen pictures where they show Old Testament times during Exodus where 4 men had the poles and were traveling that ark with them, and always went ahead of them. And you shall put into the ark the testimony which I'll give you. Well, that testimony, it's not going to declare that here, but what that testimony is, you might know this, you might not. The testimony was Aaron's rod, his staff, which got the water out of the rock, water from the rock. He just touched the rock. He also could stop serpents, so the staff was in it. The manna, the food that God provided, the manna, a box of the manna was in it, and the 10 Commandments were put in this ark. They traveled with us. All those precious things that show the power, presence, and provisions of God. His power, His presence, and His provisions were all in this ark. It's a beautiful thing. And you shall make, now here's the important part in today's message. But all that stuff going on, what does God do in 17? You shall make a mercy seat of pure gold, 2.5 cubits shall be its length, and 1.5 cubits its width. So it covers quite a bit of that whole top. It's like 3 by almost 2. And he goes into the cherubim that around it of him. He makes the cherubim hammered work. So these are beautiful pieces that were hammered out, real good sculpture, real good metal work. You shall make them at the 2 ends of the mercy seat. 1 cherub, verse 19, 1 cherub at one end, 1 at the other end. And at the end of the mercy, that they enclose the mercy seat. So you got the mercy seat in the middle, you got the 2 angels like this. They'll stretch their wings above the covering of the mercy seat with their wings, and they shall face one another. The face of the cherubim shall be forward with the mercy seat, and shall put the mercy seat on the top of the ark. That's important. And the ark, you put the testimony, which he'll give you, which I explain that to you. And this is the important part, verse 22. And there I will meet with you, and I speak with you from above the mercy seat. God is always merciful. Whatever He does in our lives, whether it's His power is with us, His presence is with us, His provisions are with us, He always wants you to understand that He is merciful. God is always merciful, He's always faithful, and He's always good, and He's always just. But we have to depend on His mercy as the Israelites did, and they didn't do that well with it. We should do better, but not always. But that closes up this section. Well, he says, let me see if I get to all of it. Pretty much. And there I'll meet with you, and that's the important part. So now we move to the New Testament, and we read, and you've heard this before, Luke 10, 23 through 37. And this is the message of the Good Samaritan. And mercy and forgiveness are close cousins, maybe even sisters. But there's a difference. Mercy is proactive. You're a merciful person to begin with. Forgiveness is retroactive. Something's happened to you and you decide to forgive someone. But a merciful person, blessed are the merciful, for you shall receive mercy. Mercy is something that we have naturally because, for example, when that little bunny ran across my foot, I wouldn't ever think of stepping on it. That's mercy. Someone can say, oh, they're eating my flowers. I say, let them eat. My wife says, I say, plant more. I'll read Luke 10, 23 through 37. Now, you know the story of the Good Samaritan. And again, it's pretty self-explanatory. again, you need someone to help you misunderstand it. It's pretty straightforward. People have preached on it forever. So let me get to it. So behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tested him. Well, I started actually in 23. 23 is interesting because Jesus is saying, it's very important what you're seeing and hearing because I'm with you. So he says that in privately, blessed are the eyes who see the things you see. For I tell you that many prophets and kings have desired to see what you see and have not seen it, and hear it, but you don't hear it, but you have heard it. So they're blessed. And we're blessed by his word because it's with us. It should bless us. It's supposed to bless us. And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tested him, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus says to him, what is written in the law and what is your reading on it? So a question deserves another question. He answers, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. Jesus said, you've answered well. Rightly, do this and you shall live. Pretty straightforward. Not saying it's easy, but the conversation is easy to understand. But he, wanting to justify himself, said to Jesus, so, okay, who's really my neighbor? So Jesus answered with this story. Certain men went down from Jericho, or to Jerusalem to Jericho, and fell among thieves, who stripped him of his clothing, wounded him, departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a certain priest came down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise the Levite, when he arrived at that place, came and looked, and passed by on the other side. The reason for that is they were probably afraid of being unclean. In those days, if you were a priest or a Levite, you were considered clean because you were that kind of person. And dare you touch a person who's unclean because you could get something from them. That was the way that they thought. But Jesus always blew that right out the door. That made no sense, and he knew it. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. That's a key word. He saw him, he had compassion. As I said before, this person, this Samaritan, unlike the priest, remember a lawyer asked Jesus the question, so the lawyer, when Jesus is saying this about a Levite and a priest, he's more or less offending that lawyer, because the lawyer would think like the Levite and the priest, not like the Samaritan, who was already merciful to begin with. He held compassion, he had mercy to begin with. So he goes there and he bandages his wounds, he pours oil on him and wine, he set him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. That evening, the next day, he departed, he took out 2 denarii, gave the innkeeper, said to him, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, let me know, and I'll repay you. So he went the extra measure. So verse 36, so which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to him who fell among the thieves? I mean, you can answer that question. You hear the story. Whether this story was in the Bible or not, and you heard this story outside of the Bible, and the question was that you'd say, obviously it's the person who helped him, and it's the same thing. And all he says to this person is go and do likewise. Be the same kind of person. And you can make, he didn't say this, but I'm saying this, you can make the world a better place by doing that kind of thing. And last but not least, this one isn't in your program, but I asked Jane to put it up. And this one's straightforward too, but it's even a little more direct. And this is also from Luke, and it's Luke 18, I think it starts in 9. Right, 9 through 14. So he spoke this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and despised others. Now there's two things wrong with that. It's one thing to think you're self-righteous, meaning I do everything right anyway, I don't need a savior, I know it all, what else do I need to know? That's very selfish thinking, but on top of it, to also despise others on top of it is really being, in my opinion, and I think the opinion of our Lord, is an ugly place to be. Not only am I very important, but no one else is important, just me. So two men went up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. Total opposites in their time. Pharisees were celebrated. Pharisees were big shots. Pharisees were important. Pharisees could get you in trouble if you did something wrong in the temple or temple grounds. The tax collector was on the margins, was even excluded, it put in the same company as sinners like prostitutes and whatever. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself: God, I thank you that I am not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even as this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I possess. And the tax collector, standing afar off, would not so much as raise his eyes to heaven. He was embarrassed, but beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. So thank you for listening to the reading of God's Word. You know, the toughest part sometimes, maybe like I read it in this book to begin with, tricky. The trickiness in our world and our society, I think, is sin. People don't want to talk about sin, hear about sin, define sin. I don't think we should define sin, that's God's business. I think we know clearly what some is and some isn't, some others we're not really sure of, so we should just stay away from that. But it's clear in the scriptures that it says in Luke 18, I read that, but in Romans 5:8, and you gotta hear this, church. God died for us while we were still sinners. It's one thing, it says in the scriptures, for a man to die for a righteous man. But he died for us even when we were actually his enemies. He died for us because he loved us, always merciful, wants to restore relationship with us, wants us to be reconciled to him. The only way you find true peace in this life, I can say my opinion is the opinion of many, but it's also happened literally in my life. My only true peace comes from my reconciliation with him. It comes in human arena too, whether it's with my wife or my children or my friends or my neighbors. If you think you're past the point of reconciliation with anyone, including God himself, you are just like this person he's talking to that thinks, I don't need it, I'm already there, I don't need to make a difference with anyone else. You really have to believe in reconciliation through mercy. You expect mercy from others, please give mercy to others. I'll close with this thought. So next time, how many of you have stools in your kitchen? Stools? Kitchen stools? No stools? Not one. No, one, two, maybe two. I see 2 stools. Okay. Think of a 3-legged stool, 3 legs. The 3 greatest gifts in this life, beyond the material. I live in the material world like you do. But beyond that, what holds us together is faith, hope, and love. Faith, hope, and love. Read 1 Corinthians 13. Holds us together. Holds the church together, holds communities together, holds the country together. Faith, hope, and love. 3 legs. 3 legs. And all of those are great attributes of God. On top of that, when you sit on that stool, what are you sitting on? The mercy seat. He's full of mercy. Because of faith, hope, and love, there's always, always mercy. And the cross itself, look at the cross. That cross made of gold. Is that a gold cross? Gold foil. Paint. Let's get a gold one, just like the ark. Anyway, the cross is powerful because it speaks of divine mercy on all of us. Thank you for listening, church, and let us stand and sing. There's a wideness in God's mercy, how true that is, and how appropriate we close with that. Thank you for picking that. Kathy